Should you go see Top Gun Maverick? Well, does a bear fit in the woods? Did Grizzly Adams have a beard? Does the Pope wear a funny hat? Is a frog's butt watertight? The answer to all those things may be. But this film, you should go see it. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a little bit biased. I might love aviation and fighter jets. If this is your first time here, I'm a former F-15E combat fighter pilot, F-16 Thunderbird pilot, and current commercial pilot. And today, I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes breakdown of what you should be looking for if you choose to go see Top Gun Maverick, which I hope you do. I think it's going to be a great film. Just a fun, enjoyable love letter to aviation. I think you're going to have a great time there. But before we get going, if you would, just dominate that like button for me and maybe even subscribe. Every time you turn that like button blue and you subscribe, you create a little mini sonic boom somewhere in the world. And that's a beautiful thing. Now stay at the very end of the video because I'm going to give you 3 things to just hang your hat on as you walk into the theaters. And you're going to be like, oh yeah, that one fighter pilot dude on YouTube told me about that. And at the very end of those 3 things, I'm going to give you a bonus bit of information that you're going to want to know. So stay at the very end. With that said, let's dive in to this watch guide for Top Gun Maverick. Here we go. So the first point that we're going to cover, guys, is that the actors in this film are actually pulling G's, which I think is awesome. I mean, they could have gone the full CGI route, but instead what we're going to get, I think, is more of a real life perspective of what it would be like if you were up in that cockpit pulling G's. So I think you're going to walk out of this theater feeling a little bit like you have a slightly better understanding of the forces and just the demand on your body when you're pulling G-forces, because you're going to see these actors with their face just turning to goo. Well, hopefully not, but you're going to see their face getting pulled down by 9 Gs, which I think is awesome. The actors are also doing cinematography, and I'll tell you a little bit of background on that. So when I was on the Thunderbirds, I was the photo mission officer. I was essentially the assistant to the regional manager of photo operations. So what I did was I set up epic shots of the Thunderbirds all around the country and around the world. And it takes a lot to create an environment up in the sky where you can get great footage and where you can get an environment where you can tell the story and show what's actually happening with fighter jets and with any airplane. So most likely what these actors are going to be focused on are very similar to the things that I tried to do when I was on the Thunderbirds. And the first thing that I'll tell you about is epic location. You gotta have a great background. I mean, there's a story about Howard Hughes, and he was filming an aviation film back in the day. If you don't know, Howard Hughes, he's just like this crazy, eccentric oil baron who became a pilot and started shooting Hollywood movies. But he needed clouds in the background of his film to give perspective for some of his World War II dogfighting scenes. Because if there's no clouds, then there's no perspective. It's just a blue sky and you see these planes moving around, but there's no reference. So what I think you're probably gonna see is you're gonna see a lot of these scenes where there will either be landscape in the background, like mountains, or there will be clouds. And that's what I would try to do when we were coming back from like the East Coast to Las Vegas as a formation of 7 on the Thunderbirds. We would pop one out that had a photographer in the back, and we would plan the photo mission to drop in like over the Grand Canyon or something epic like that. So that's the first point for cinematography airborne, is find an epic location. The second thing is you gotta have great contrast with the jets. So if you have the white tops of the Thunderbirds, for example, and you have a washed out white background, it's just not gonna look cool. And what is one of the main principles I always tell you guys about? You gotta look cool and you gotta sound cool on the radio. Most important principles of fighter aviation. I know you guys already know that. The next part that I'm gonna tell you about, this is probably one that can slip through the cracks and you might not think about it. And it gets into a little bit of nerdery, but you essentially think about the solar elevation. Yeah, that's right, the solar elevation. And I actually broke this down for you, so no need to get nervous, no need to start sweating. I got you. When Top Gun Maverick releases May 27th, let's say you're going to see a 2:30 p.m. nice little matinee show and you're excited about it. I'm excited for you. Essentially at that time, the solar azimuth is going to be 51 degrees. So let's think about this. If it's 90 degrees, it'd be straight above you, so that'd be around noon. The sun then is gonna transition to the side, so it's gonna be, it's gonna split that difference between 0, 90 degrees, so it's gonna be right about 50 degrees at 2:30 p.m. Not a bad time to be shooting if you have fighter jets up in the sky, but what I noticed is if I would shoot during that time of day, most likely I would probably get some washout because the sun is gonna be extremely strong coming from that angle. So don't you worry. I fast forwarded us to 5:30 p.m. And around 5:30 p.m., you're gonna get about a 22 degree solar elevation on May 27th if you're catching that 5:30 show. And at 5:30, the sun's gonna be coming from that about 20 to 23 degree mark, so it's gonna be closer to golden hour. And to me, this is when I really wanted to shoot the cinematography side of the Thunderbirds. And I think most likely, most of their shooting during this film is gonna happen during that time. Because think about it, it's kind of like a big spotlight kind of shining from the side, giving you the perfect sun angle and perspective so you can really make out the crisp details of the fighter jets, and even you'll be able to see the actors better inside the cockpits. And the last thing to think about with aerial photography is your formation. So you've got to have great formation keeping, like knowing where the other aircraft are behind you in the shot. And I'm sure the actors thought a lot about it. Maybe they even sat down beforehand and positioned where the jets would be so that when they were making certain facial expressions, the right fighter jets were in the right spots. The second point to consider is that Tom Cruise actually flies the P-51, which is epic. And I've heard some people say, no F-18 pilot would ever be able to do that. But I'm gonna tell you a story about a friend of mine. He was on the Thunderbirds with me, and right after the Thunderbirds, he was at a little airport doing some flying, and he came across this ultra rich dude who was like, hey, I have a T-34. This T-34 was awesome. It was painted bright yellow. And this guy was like, hey, if you help me do a little bit of maintenance on this T-34, you can fly it anytime you want. So here's my friend, F-16 Thunderbird pilot, and he's now flying the T-34 on his off days. So weird things can happen, especially when you're on the air show circuit. Like, let's say in this movie, Maverick had done a lot of air shows, brought a lot of F-18s to different air shows. He's gonna meet people who are gonna have P-51s, and I guarantee they would totally be cool with making sure that he's trained up and good to go in the P-51, but then tossing him the keys and most likely flying with him as well. So this is not that far out of the realm. And it's worth noting that Maverick, Tom Cruise, actually tried to fly the F-18. Good on you for trying, man. Hey, if you're not trying, what are you doing? You gotta try. You gotta put yourself out there and ask. So Jerry Bruckheimer said they asked the Navy, and the Navy was like, oh, hell no. Not gonna happen. Which, I kind of understand, because at the end of the day, let's say you got Tom Cruise in there's some sort of an emergency, they have to eject. Now they just lost like a $70 million aircraft, and that one's gonna be hard to explain. If you give that one back to the taxpayers, that's what we would always say. If you crashed a jet, you're giving it back to the taxpayers. The Navy might be a little bit angry. They're already like, dude, we're giving you F-18s for like months in a row. Can't you just be grateful? Gosh. And the third thing is, this seems to be an epic story with pretty decent character development. I mean, I look at Sundown, I look at Phoenix, Rooster, Maverick, and then you've got the lore of Iceman. He's not really in the film, but I think there's the potential here for some epic character development. And it looks to me like the Navy didn't take out, or they didn't make the producers take out some of the tension and some of the drama that can happen in fighter squadrons. Because what I notice is there's kind of like the Maverick type who gets more respect from their flying skills and maybe their personality outside of work. And then you've got the Iceman type vibe where they're basically more focused on promotion and just kind of being the go-to guy or gal for the boss. And in my opinion, you need both types of personalities because they encourage the other one to level up. We need all types when it comes to fighter pilots, and you can probably even think of that in the job you're in now. You need all types. We got to learn from each other. All right, so there's the 3 key points. Now you made it to the end. Ask and you shall receive the bonus. So for the bonus, I'm going to dispel some myths. And one of those myths is that they should have used the F-35. Why are they using the F-18 for this movie? Well, as you can probably imagine, they would have to use a lot of CGI for the F-35 because there's no 2-seat versions of that F-35. So the F-18 is kind of perfect for that from a filming perspective. And I think if we did an Air Force competitor with Top Gun, it would be epic to have the F-35 involved, but to get the real G-forces, they would need to use probably the F-15E or some two-seat Vipers to make it happen. So most likely that's why the F-35 is missing out on Top Gun. And then next they said, well, Maverick's in his 60s. He would never go into combat. And I've seen some comments on my channel as well, people saying that. And you know what? I think he actually would go into combat at his 60s if he could handle it. Because at the end of the day, I've seen the military make a lot of exceptions based on performance. I got to fly with a guy close to his 60s who was a 2-star general. In the Navy, that would be a Rear Admiral upper half. If I was a Rear Admiral, I'd make my first point of order: no one shall ever call anyone else Rear Admiral ever again. You're welcome, Rear Admirals. And all you Rear Admirals out there, let's make this happen. Let's come up with a cooler name. Comment below if you have a cooler name than Rear Admiral. We can do better. I mean, even Commodore to me is cooler, which is, oof. I feel kind of bad saying that. But what I noticed when I was flying with this 2-star general was essentially it was my job to be really good at know the systems of the airplane because they were focused on bigger picture problems. Up at the level where they were making decisions, they weren't necessarily focused on some of the little minute types of things that happen with fighter jets. So I was there to kind of make sure everything stayed safe. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I was a captain at the time, a senior captain. In the Navy, it would be a senior lieutenant. That's when you're kind of in your sweet spot and you're incredibly good at flying fighter jets. And a lot of times, they will team up those types of people, instructors, and just extremely experienced aviators with some of the leadership and some of the older generals. Now, Tom Cruise in this movie, Maverick, he's not a general, so I think he's been flying a ton. So I bet he could hold his own without the seeing eye dog is what we would call it, the person watching the general. But ultimately, if you're good to go and you're 60, hey, I think it could happen. So overall, I don't want to overthink Top Gun for you. I think this is going to be an epic film, and I think we can all just enjoy it. One of the cool things that I'll highlight for you before we go is that while you're watching Top Gun, maybe think of some of the character development. Maybe you're more like Phoenix, Sundown, Maverick, Rooster, or some of the other characters. You see bits of yourself in those characters. Now, I'm assuming you can probably see blind spots in yourself as well. So there's something that we can all learn from each other. So I love watching films that can potentially become iconic films and think of ways that you see yourself in those characters and potentially ways that you can improve. A little bit of self-reflection never hurt anybody. So most of all, don't forget to bring your G-suits. It's gonna be an epic film with real G-forces. So excited for this film to come out. Thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to me. Before we go, why don't we just dominate that like button? And hey, maybe even subscribe. Create that little mini sonic boom. It would mean a lot to me, and hey, maybe even check out some of my other videos. You can also hit me up on the @BJetClean Instagram and give me any other story ideas or things that you want me to break down. Most of all, thanks for being here. Hope you have a great day.
Everyone here is the best there is. Who the hell are they gonna get to teach us?